we've been through all this. Now the question is, what'll I do? I've got this knowledge. I've got this interest. I've been given some tools, you might say, intellectual tools to use. So what'll I do? Well, I came up with a group of future challenges, and I'm going to read off this list, but also I want this on the screen so that you'll have it and in written form, and it continue to bug you. The first one is, when we look at the growing challenges and the things that we've talked about over these last 6 weeks, we know there's a growing world population. We don't know how fast that's going to grow because we know that birth rates will fall as standards of living rise, as well as through disease and the like. But if you look at the world's population graphs from years ago, it turns out that the only blip in stopping that occurred in this rather exponential rise was the plagues, the Black Plagues in Europe. Wars don't seem to have a big impact, as, of course, the nuclear exchange of large degree would. There's no question, because millions would die. But generally, there's a growing world population. We also know there's going to be an increasing demand for energy in that population, because we showed that gross domestic product per capita is directly related to energy consumption per capita. And of course, the higher you can get the GDP per capita for the least amount of energy consumption per capita, that says you're running your country efficiently on an energy basis, using economy as the measure. So people in a lot of the developing countries and other parts of the world, they want more energy because they want to have a lifestyle like, say, we do in the United States, or occurs in Shanghai or London, and or down in major cities in Africa, and South America. So there is this demand for energy, and of course there's going to be a commensurate pollution with that. Also, with growing population, there's greater demand for food. And, of course, that says that we're going to deforest in one thing or another. And we may remember that from that National Geographic article on coal, that by taking and deforesting, we actually contribute to the carbon dioxide concentration in the atmosphere, because we've gotten rid of the plants that use it. So, the old rule that how much you have is a function of how much you make minus how much you get rid of. Well, if we get rid of some of the mechanisms for getting rid of carbon dioxide, the levels will rise. And, of course, with growing pollution, energy demands, and so on, food is going to cost more. And when food prices rise, not everybody can get proper nutrition, and so there's going to be civil unrest, as an example. All this means there's going to be growing competition for natural resources, and in particular air and water. Air always was taught when I was in college, hey, that's a free good. It's there for everybody, just use it. But because pollutants are now in the air, it costs us to put those pollutants in the air. If you look at the Clean Air Acts in the United States, you'd see that to be the case. A plant has to, say a coal plant, has to put on a sulfur removing process. Well, that's part of like a chem plant. If we're going to start getting rid of nitrous oxides because of nitric acid production, or carbon dioxide is emitted from the burning of whatever, coal, gas, or oil, dear me, it turns out that the electrical generating plant is going to really be a chemical processing facility that makes electricity. And all that increases the cost, so air is not free. Furthermore, a recent article in the Economist magazine made the point that, the population is aging. The ratio of older people to younger people is increasing. And this is going to be exacerbated by the fact that what are we doing? We're all trying to live longer because we like it here, or we're worried about question number 3: where do we go after we die, if anywhere? And also, in the bioengineering, biotechnology area, I mean, people are beginning to figure out how to make organs. When you need a new kidney, they'll take out your old one and make a new one from the parts of that aren't infected or bad, and put it back in you. So we're all going to be live long. In fact, again, National Geographic had an article with a baby on the cover, and it said, this child will live to be 102. So is 65 the year to retire? Who knows? I personally don't think so. So we've got an aging population, which also is because it's increasing and because it's aging, is going to need more help to survive. And this brings out ethical questions such as cost-benefit. People might say, hey, look at, and there have been tribes where this was true. If they only have certain limited resources, and you get to a certain age and you're not contributing, they invite you to go take a walk in the jungle or get on an ice floe and leave the community. So there's going to be all kinds of economic and ethical questions on the aging population. Furthermore, and we heard this from Jiten Ruparel, the modifications of living organisms via engineering and biomedical techniques. New kinds of bacteria, new, particular for germ warfare, or new types of virus, or can we create a placenta such that we can have children birthed and born out of the womb, much like, I don't know if you saw the movie, I think in Matrix, but definitely Lord of the Rings, by Tolkien. He was making these orcs out of, a guy was quite smart, really. I mean, he was getting his organic material from trees and water, and he had a way to make these living organisms outside of a human being. There'll be increasing use of robotics and computers to take over human activity with commensurate unemployment problems. And we're already beginning to see this. They're developing robots that'll work alongside you. And if you've got a robot working alongside of you in a particular job, or there's a manufacturing particularly, you don't need another person. And what's that person that's replaced going to do? And this is a problem facing our country right now. We also, computers are taking over a lot of the menial tasks that people had in offices. So it isn't just in manufacturing, but it's kind of, you're seeing robotics in the medical field. So all this is leading to a whole shifting of the spectrum of the workforce. And it can happen pretty fast because technologies are developed quickly these days. If you want to have a successful technology, the trick is to the marketplace fast. Get that new idea into the marketplace fast before somebody else does. And you want to do it while minimizing opportunity costs and everything else. This problem is going to be rising, and of course, with an older population, it's exacerbating as well. And this brings forth ethical issues, and it also brings forth questions of how are we going to modify the educational system so that people can be equipped to go from one kind of a job to another. I'll just give you an example today. It turns out that the trades, plumbing, electrical work, and that sort of thing, welding, there's a shortage. And, in some college degrees, you don't get a return on your investment. After paying for college, you get a negative return or a little return. And if you like doing things with your hands, and you do better off going to work in a trade and going to a trade school. Then I've actually suggested that to some of my grandchildren. And of course, in the midst of all these things that are going on, these challenges, that's bringing about a more rapid increase in cultural change, and as a consequence, associated ethical values. I mean, look at the letter I got from the fellow from Columbia. He's thinking, can robots and humans get together and raise families? I never would have thought of that. Because to me, when I was born in 1931, and my values were established during that 10-year period, and these students in his class, they were born, well, let's see, if they're in college, they were probably born around the turn of the century, just before, early 90s. And, hey, you know, gay rights was present, families, what's that? Families are being changed dramatically. So many single parents raising children, divorce rates high. What is a family anyway? And some of them are dysfunction, and gee whiz, there's drugs and one thing or another. So maybe I get along better with my dog and cat or with my robot than anybody else. And, you know, so maybe I'll have a pal. My pal's going to be a robot. And they're making robots more and more like humans all the time. They look like them. The Japanese for years have been working on creating facial muscles for the robots so they can show, you know, love, affection, fear, anger. And that just reinforces even more the importance of what we were talking about in communication when we said that it's important that you understand this concept. You are what you were when. It's like me, born in the 30s, dealing with somebody born in 1995. We got totally different views about a lot of things. And I think you're kind of nuts, but I'll respect you and I'll work with you. And he's probably saying, you're an old fuddy-duddy, dyed-in-the-wool guy, you know. But that's the kind of thing we have to work with. And these things that are occurring, you look at this list, you read your newspapers, you watch in your journals, you watch the news, you go to Google News, whatever it is, and keep your awareness up, and you're going to see that these are going on, and then you have some ethics in yourself, some beliefs, and the question is, what do we do next? And we'll talk about that next time we get together.